They're on.
Wait for the exact minute.
You can.
Okay. So you want to get up and sing "O Canada"?
That's terrific. Get any better than that.
They're ready to go?
I'm ready to go.
Okay.
Thank you.
Good evening, everyone. I see that we have quorum, so I call to order this public meeting, this meeting of council, Monday, May 13th, 2019. Public meeting under the Planning Act. And after viewing the agenda, does any council member have any changes to be made? I'm seeing none. Does any council member have any pecuniary interest or general nature there? Oh, I'm sorry. I've got to do the agenda first. You're right. You'd think I'd learn about these little papers. We have a motion put forward by Councillor Stewart, the adoption of the agenda, that the agenda for the May 13th, 2019 public meeting under the Planning Act, special meeting of Committee of the Whole be adopted as circulated. All those in favor? All those opposed? Thank you. Motion is carried. Now we go down to, after viewing the agenda, does any member of council have a pecuniary interest and general nature thereof to declare? And seeing none, advise the clerk of that. And now we are to Planning Act application. Shall I be putting it on?
Yes, please.
No.
From there on.
What, from here?
From here.
Yeah, okay.
Thank you.
An official plan amendment, zoning bylaw amendment, and draft plan of subdivision to permit the use of the property for 135 single detached, 36 semi-detached, 110 street townhouses, 126 block townhouses, townhouse dwellings, and one 1.5 hectare park with associated roads, stormwater open space, environmental protection areas. The Planning Act requires under sections 22, 34, and 51 that council must hold at least one public meeting for the purpose of informing the public in respect of the proposed official plan amendment, zoning bylaw amendment, and draft plan of subdivision. This public meeting has been called to satisfy this requirement. Notice of this meeting was provided by prepaid first-class mail to all persons who are listed as owners in the last revised assessment roll and within 120 meters of the subject property on April 17th, 2019. The notice provided information on the property and the proposed official plan amendment, zoning bylaw amendment, and draft plan of subdivision. In addition to providing information, we will also receive any comments which any member of the public may wish to offer. Excuse me. This is an attendance list on the, there is an attendance list on the table, which we would ask anyone who is interested in this application and is present to print their name and complete mailing address if they wish to be notified of the decision by council. And if a person or public body would otherwise have an ability to appeal the decision of the town of Pelham to the local planning appeal tribunal, but the person or public body does not make oral submissions at the public meeting or make written submissions to the town of Pelham before the bylaw is passed, the person/public body is not entitled to appeal the decision. In closing, we stress that at this point, no decision has been made on the proposed official plan amendment, zoning bylaw amendment, or draft plan of subdivision, and therefore any comments received will be taken into account for council's consideration. Okay, and I believe, Curtis, you will do the presenting. Please, thank you.
Good evening, Council, Mayor, and members from the public. I'm Curtis Thompson. I'm a planner here with the town. So the applications before us, as the mayor just went over, are for an official plan amendment, a zoning bylaw amendment, and a draft plan of subdivision application. The subject lands are over 25 hectares in size and outlined in red on the PowerPoint. They're bounded by Port Robinson Road to the north, Merritt Road to the south, vacant agricultural land to the west, and to the east they're flanked by Saffron Meadows Phase 1 and 2, which are currently under construction at the southwest corner of Port Robinson and Rice Road. The official plan amendment is seeking to modify policy B1.7741B to allow or to increase the number of low density dwellings within the medium density residential designation of the official plan. The zoning bylaw amendment is required because the zoning in this whole area is agriculture, as per the 1987 bylaw, which is actually out of conformity of the official plan at the moment. And the draft plan of subdivision seeks to create 135 single detached dwellings, 36 semi-detached dwellings, 110 street townhouses, 126 block townhouse dwellings, usually in the form of a condominium, 1.5 hectare park, and then 6.1 hectares of associated open space, environmental protection lands, and water courses. And the draft plan of subdivision would actually facilitate the creation of the roads, the lots, and the blocks. This is the draft plan of subdivision. The roads on the south part of or the bottom part of the image here are linking up with Saffron Meadows Phase 1 and 2. Street C is intersecting with Port Robinson Road to the north, and all the roads on the west would be have temporary turnarounds, as that land doesn't have an active application on it, the farmland to the west. And then to the south is a provincially significant wetland and associated significant woodlands as well. Provincial policies that the planners have been reviewing are the 2014 Provincial Policy Statement. The 2014 PPS outlines matters of provincial interest and directs policy measures for local municipalities and regional municipalities. A couple high-level policies of it. It's founded on efficient use of land and development. It promotes the financial well-being of the province, the town, encouraging mixes of uses that don't cause environmental, public health, or safety concerns, compact urban built form, sustainability, and connectivity. The Greenbelt Plan is not in effect in this area, as it's an urban area. The growth plan for the Greater Golden Horseshoe, which will be updated on May 19th, I believe, or the 16th, goes into more detail about how growth is to be allocated and directed throughout Southern Ontario. In the growth plan, these lands are designated as a greenfield area, and because of that, the policies that apply to them are different. The density targets are different than if it's within the existing built-up area, if, for example, there was a building on the property. The growth plan goes into more detail about how development and land use planning should be carried out. The Niagara Region official plan also has it designated as a greenfield area within the urban area boundary, as per provincial land use plans, and it's outlined approximately in red. The purple area are all the greenfield areas within the town. It's a little outdated at the moment because there's been a number of projects over the years, but basically at the time when that plan was created, everything was vacant. The Town of Pelham official plan we have the East Fun Hill secondary plan, which everyone's familiar with, and that goes into more detail by setting out the local land use designations, specific policy measures, density targets as well, in conformity with the regional and the provincial policy measures, and it goes into showing on the demonstration plan and the land use schedules the street network of collectors, suggested local roads, and approximately areas for like where parks and land use designations lie. And on the left hand side of the screen, these are some of the some of the primary uses that we would find in those designations. The low density, single, semis, towns. The medium density, you're usually going to find townhouses or smaller apartments or multiplexes. There's no high density designation in this area. Public parkland, which we're familiar with, and then environmental protection 1 and 2, which essentially is a lot of forestry conservation, flood control projects, and in terms of active uses, like you potentially having passive recreational trails subject to an environmental assessment. The zoning bylaw, which is consolidated or circa 1987, actually has these lands zoned agricultural. And as you can see on the map here, the adjacent subdivision had to go through a zoning amendment to bring the uses or allow the uses for development to conform with the official plan and actually allow the development to happen. And that's what the applicants are seeking, to amend the zoning from agricultural to a number of site-specific zones ranging from single, semis, townhouses, and parkland. This is a summary of agency and public comments. The utilities are just calling for a lot of the standard subdivision agreement clauses. Public Works Department, much of the same, with some small technical revisions to the functional servicing reports and drawings. No issues from fire. The Conservation Authority did have a few conditions requiring work permits for certain works to be carried out, like the realignment of the watercourse and rezoning of the provincially significant wetland to the south. The region did not object. They did have some conditions as well, and as long as the local municipality was satisfied. At the time of my report writing, we had received 3 comments from the public, one from a neighboring property owner who supports the development applications. One neighbor is concerned about future possible speeding concerns on Street C, which would be named Clagger Street. It's the continuation of Clagger Street from the north up near River Estates Phase 2. It was raised in pre-consultation that could be a potential area for speeding concern by the region. It's a long straight stretch of road, so just making sure that it gets designed carefully when we come to that point. They did suggest intersection treatments near Port Robinson where they live, perhaps because they're concerned that speeding and traffic would be aggravated post-development. Another resident was questioning whether the proposed draft plan meets the general intent of the demonstration plan or Appendix A of the official plan. Had issue with the lack of consideration of neighboring lands to the north as they relate to the requirement for a neighborhood master plan, and had a policy concern as it related to neighboring development agreements or cost sharing agreements amongst landowners within the identified development lands of East Swan Hill. This presentation is provided information on the official plan amendment, zoning bylaw amendment, and draft plan of subdivision for the lands known as Saffron Meadows Phase 3. No recommendations or decisions concerning these applications have been or will be made at this meeting. And Barb and I are happy to answer any questions of council or the public.
Thank you for that presentation, Curtis. Any questions from councillors?
Yes, through you, Mr. Mayor. On the question whether the proposed draft plan meets the general intent and design of the demonstration plan, Appendix A. Why did that residents have a concern on that issue?
Through the mayor, that resident's letter, it didn't actually go into too much detail about that comment, more just about it was questioning whether it was consistent with the demonstration plan. There actually wasn't much detail on that comment from the resident.
Okay, but are we satisfying the detailed plans, or?
Through the mayor, town staff have been working with the developers on improving the draft plan and having it be more consistent, and there's certainly been a lot of progress with this draft plan compared to previous iterations of the plan. A recommendation hasn't been formed yet.
So we're not following Appendix A so far, is that, am I right saying that?
Through the mayor, that's not necessarily true.
Okay, issues with the policy plan B 1.7.11.5C. Is there any concerns that we need to know about that?
I'd have to look into it. I don't, which policy that one is.
That's with the issue with the one underneath it. He had an issue with one of the residents had an issue with that policy.
That's, Mr. Mayor, through you, that's with regards to the developers group agreement. And there is a policy in the official plan that does provide for a developers group agreement in these various residential neighborhoods. So at this point in time, there hasn't been any request for a developers group agreement. And we're going to be working with the applicant with respect to those comments and trying to address that. But at this point in time, there hasn't been a request for a developers group agreement that we're aware of.
Thank you. Councillor Hahn?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, on page 12 of 17 of the report here, or information, I guess I should call it, information report, it speaks to the current R2 zone and proposed R2 zone. So if you look at the yards, interior yard, front yard, exterior yard, and encroachments, all those are being reduced significantly. So is this mandated by the provincial government, or this is just on the wish list of the developers?
Through the mayor, these zoning regulations that they're proposing are actually very common for current development standards. In fact, it's very challenging to meet the density targets unless the zoning regulations are reduced to a degree, or alternatively different land uses being proposed. There's a variety of ways it can be achieved. Much of what we've seen in East Fun Hill and neighboring municipalities demonstrates these regulations, and this is what the applicant had requested.
Any other questions? Yes, Councillor Hill.
Through you, Mr. Mayor. The concerns with regards to speeding, specifically on Port Robinson Road, the residents along Port Robinson Road are continually contacting the two councillors from that ward about speeding and addressing that issue. With the impact of this subdivision, does that only aggravate the situation until we come up with some kind of speeding solution?
Mr. Mayor, through you, certainly speeding, the enforcement of speeding is done by the police. The draft plan application was certainly circulated to the police. We haven't received any comments with respect to that issue. Now, certainly there are some design matters that can be, we can look at, you know, with respect to the design of the road. Those would be outside of this plan of subdivision to address speeding matters, though.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, block 177, and it says 41 units. Is that a high-rise townhomes in the presentation?
Through the mayor, block 177, the applicants had proposed as townhouses.
And 41 of them, and then right across the street, we have another one with 85 units. And they, is that similar, townhomes or high-rise?
Yeah, they're not proposing apartments in this application, just townhouses in those two blocks, like condominium townhouses.
So with all this new development, how many more new, and I'm going to agree with Councillor Hildebrand, how much more traffic, have we done a study on Port Robinson Road?
Already been done, right?
Mr. Mayor, through you, Port Robinson Road is designated as a collector road in the official plan and in the secondary plan. And a number of years ago, Port Robinson Road was reconstructed, And certainly the design of Port Robinson Road was taken into consideration this whole area for development, not just these lands, but all of East Fonthill. And so back at that time, there was certainly some parameters given in terms of the design of Port Robinson Road and its ability to carry additional traffic associated with development of the East Fonthill neighborhood.
Thank you.
For you, Mr. Mayor. So, how many cars per unit in this subdivision is allowed? And previously, we said one, is it?
Mr. Mayor, through you, the parking requirements for a single detached dwelling is 1 car per dwelling unit, and in a townhouse, it's 1 car per dwelling unit plus half a space for every 2 units for visitor parking. So they have not asked for changes to the parking requirements. At this stage, we don't have the house designs to know specifically what each unit will be in terms of a 1 or 2 car garage or single wide or double wide driveway. That comes later, but they're not asking for variances to the parking requirements.
Thank you. Oh, yes, Councillor.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, it also shows on here second dwelling units. So is there any idea of how many second dwelling units we'd end up with, which would greatly impact the parking as well, if there's only 1 space allocated and then somebody adds a secondary dwelling unit?
Mr. Mayor, through you, if they are going to be adding a second dwelling unit, they need to provide for parking for that second dwelling unit as well.
Okay, thank you. Yes, Councillor Hahn.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, as the, one of the individuals was a planner and is a planner, I just want to ensure that going forward, we are going to be addressing his concerns in the report that will come back to us then. They'll all be addressed in some way, shape, or form when they come back.
Yes, certainly, Mr. Mayor, through you, when we come back with our recommendation report, our intent is to have all of those concerns and any other public concerns that may come in between now and then addressed.
So earlier Curtis had mentioned that they weren't very specific in the questions. So is this individual able to then be more specific, or can you speak with him to get clarification as to what he's actually seeking so that there's clarity on his question?
Yes, Mr. Mayor, certainly through you, we will be seeking to do that. He's
Beautiful.
currently out of town.
Okay, thanks.
Any other questions? Okay, so let me just, so now the applicant's going to make it?
Yes, after you can go ahead and read this motion to receive the information, and then the applicant has the
Indeed,
presentation.
a motion. So with no further questions from council, we have a motion from Councillor Wink. That committee received this Department of Community Planning and Development report for information as it pertains to file numbers 26T19-02-18, OPAM-03-18, and AM-04-18. And that committee directs planning staff to prepare the recommendation report on this topic for council consideration based on the applicant's final submission. So we shouldn't have heard from the applicant first before we pass this?
No, we hear from planning, and then we hear from the applicant.
Okay, sorry. All in favor of receiving this report for information? Okay, and any opposed? No one's opposed. Motion is carried. And now the applicant makes it happen.
That's right.
And now if the applicant is present, do they wish to make an application? And yes, they do. Thank you.
Thank you. Good evening, members of council and members of the public. My name is Jennifer Vita from Upper Canada Consultants. I'm a registered professional planner, and I'm here tonight on behalf of HURT Inc. Tonight is the statutory public meeting required under the Planning Act for applications for official plan amendment, zoning bylaw amendment, and draft plan of subdivision for the lands known as Saffron 3. The subject lands are located at 162 Port Robinson Road on the south side of the road extending through to Merritt Road. The property is approximately 29 hectares in size with about 5 hectares of wooded and environmental lands. The property is located immediately west of Saffron Phase 1 and 2, which are currently under development along Rice Road. The lands fall within the East Fawn Hills Secondary Plan Area and have been designated for urban development for many years. The subject lands are shown in purple on the screen and as part of the overall development area. The proposed plan includes public road connections from the lands that are currently under development to the east, and also the plan also provides future road connections for development to the west when that proceeds. The plan consists of 135 single detached dwellings, 110 street townhouse dwellings, 126 condo dwellings along Port Robinson Road, a large community park in the center of the plan, an open channel to convey stormwater to the pond just east of the lands, and larger environmental areas located along the south portion of the property. The proposed plan has been in development for over 2 years with many factors and constraints to consider in the plan layout. As part of the application before you, a number of studies have been undertaken on the lands, including an environmental impact study, a functional servicing study, archaeological studies, and a planning justification report. The outcomes of the various studies have informed the developable area of the lands and ultimately led to the plan layout. In order to implement the proposed plan, a number of approval applications are required, including an application to amend the town's official plan to modify the language that restricts the types of housing that are permitted throughout the plan. The proposed plan provides a mix of housing types in various areas of the plan, which is generally consistent with the secondary plan, but requires some minor modifications. An application to rezone the lands has also been submitted. Even though the lands are part of the secondary plan area and part of the town's urban boundary, the lands still have an agricultural zoning on them. The current agricultural zoning does not permit the proposed development. And in order to permit the development, a zoning application has been submitted to rezone the lands into various Town of Pelham zones that reflect the proposed plan layout. Through the submission and circulation process, comments have been received from all agencies, including Town of Pelham Public Works Department, Town of Pelham Fire Department, Building Department, Niagara Regional Planning and Engineering Services, the Niagara Peninsula Conservation Authority, Bell Canada, Canada Post, Enbridge Gas, and Hydro One. The agency comments are all generally supportive of the application, subject to some minor plan modifications. The town has received letters from the public in regards to the applications. A letter from Mr. Hummel is in support of the proposed plan. A letter from Mr. and Mrs. Edwards indicating concerns about traffic calming and safety along Port Robinson Road. And a letter from Mr. and Mrs. Larmer questioning if the plan meets the general intent and design of the demonstration plans and indicates a lack of coordination and thought on how the lands along Port Robinson Road will be integrated and developed in the future. I am aware of several meetings with the owner's representatives and Mr. Larmer over the past year and a half, as they own lands along Port Robinson Road, adjacent to the proposed development. Through the many discussions with Mr. Larmer, we have prepared concept plans to show how his lands can easily be developed independently of the subject lands. And I have some copies of some plans that I can circulate to you just for information purposes. I'm gonna just take one and pass it around.
Thank you.
It's my understanding that the developers reached out on more than one occasion to try to work with Mr. Larmer, but there was no response to their last correspondence. Again, it is my opinion that the proposed development will not impact the future development potential on the adjacent lands. My conclusion and professional planning opinion for you this evening is that this is a very well thought out and sensitive plan. The plan has considered and provided connections to both the approved and future development areas to the east and west, which will provide for a connected and integrated community. The plan is generally consistent with the demonstration plan in the secondary plan and is sensitive to the identified environmental areas and is considered good land use planning. Thank you, and that concludes my presentation.
Thank you. Now they can question her. And does any counselor have questions for the applicant? I guess I have one. With the changes brought down last week by the Ford government, and they seem to be relaxing some of the parameters on provincially significant wetland. If that was to come in effect, and maybe I'm wrong there, but I thought I read that somewhere in the report that they're going to loosen the controls on that. If that was to happen, and it's really this is strictly conjecture, would the applicant come back and make a different application of surrounding the the wetlands?
I don't believe the applicant would be exploring that option. They have been working with an environmental consultant for 3 to 4 years on this plan. It's taken a long time to get to this point. This application is being considered under today's policies. We would expect the environmental boundaries to remain the same.
Okay, great, thank you. John, no? No other questions for the applicant? Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you.
And, back to the green paper. Got it. So we have the recommendation from Councilwoman Hildebrandt. The committee received the presentation materials submitted by the applicant for information as it pertains to files OP-AM-03-18, AM-03-18, and 26T-19-0218. All those in favor? All those opposed? Recommendation carries. And now at this time, we ask if there is anyone present that would also like to speak out for or against or about this application. Is there anyone present? Going once? Going twice? And going a third time. Okay, so please note that no public input was taken. So as I mentioned before, correspondence submitted from the public was Hummel Properties, Craig and Kelly Larmer, and of course back to the green. A recommendation put forward by Councillor Hahn that committee receive the correspondence submitted by Hummel Properties Inc. regarding official plan application OP-AM-03-18, zoning bylaw amendment AM-03-18, and draft plan of subdivision 26T19-02-18, Hurt Inc., and that the correspondence be referred to staff for consideration and preparation of the recommendation report relating to the applications. All those in favor? All those opposed? Motion recommendation carries. Okay, and then like I say, now we have another one. This motion put forward by Councillor Kaur. The committee received the correspondence submitted by Craig and Kelly Larmer regarding official plan application OP-AM-03-18, zoning bylaw amendment AM-03-18, and draft plan of subdivision 26T19-02-18, Hurt Inc., and that the correspondence be referred to staff for consideration and preparation of the recommendation report relating to the applications. All those in favor? All those against? Recommendation carries. Okay. No. Oh, so now I should, committee input, so should I ask if any councilors have any?
You can ask if anyone.
So this is the part of the meeting, councilors, where does any councilor have any final comments about said applicant? Now would be the time to voice those. Councilor Hahn?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, just further to what I was asking earlier, is just to ensure that we are very thorough in our correspondence with those people that have already suggested Edwards and Larmor, and that we are able to provide answers to them and seek further input so that that is done. And also, too, with regards to my earlier comment, just trying to fully understand how it is that we're able to shave off front yards, backyards, and side yards to cram and jam more houses into, if there's not another alternative to that. I'd like to see if that's a possibility. Because when you start looking at sidewalks, putting sidewalks in, and people's front yards are so much closer, i.e. you look at the corner of Port Robinson Road and Rice, people's front yards are almost on the road, so when they start clearing snow from the sidewalk and their front stoop, where is all that gonna go? They're so close to the road now. I just don't know that that's, and I realize it's so we can get more houses in, but I just don't know that that's what I would want to see for development. I'm not against development, but I just think that people need front yards, and I think we're just cutting them in half, side yards and backyards, for me, isn't the way to go. So I'd just like to see alternatives to that.
Perhaps Madam Director of Planning might want to comment on those comments?
Certainly, Mr. Mayor, through you, as indicated by Curtis, certainly the development standards have been reduced, and that is pretty typical in today's development environment. The standards that are in our current zoning bylaw do not allow for the type of development that's needed to meet the provincial density targets, and so it's resulted in reduction to things like front yards and side yards in order to achieve more units. So those are things that we take a look at. We certainly take into consideration things like, adequate space for snow storage, because we do get snow, as well as adequate space for amenity area for the residents so that they do have, at least some quiet place to sit in their rear yard. And then adequate space for being able to accommodate swales and drainage as well, because the yards have to do all of those things. So those are all the things that we certainly look at when we're looking at the zoning standards that are being requested.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
I think further to that, Mr. Mayor, I think it cheapens the look and feel of a subdivision when we start shortening. Really there's very little green space because there's very little yard. You start reducing the size of the yard and you start reducing the, I think, in my opinion, the appearance of the neighborhood when everything just becomes, a jungle of houses, and rather than any green lawns and trees and such, because there's no room for them. And then you have issues like the swales, which is near and dear to my heart. So I'd like to know, as far as alternatives, they do exist. Mm-hmm. So this is a matter of developers wanting it that way so they can get more in. I understand that, but at the same time, as council, we have the ability to say no, correct?
Mr. Mayor, the decision is always with council.
So,
Thank you.
thanks.
Any other comments? Okay, not seeing anyone. I will now read this last piece of paper. Recommendation put forward by Councilor Trophy that the special committee of the whole public meeting under the Planning Act be adjourned. Okay. There we go. Oh, I'm sorry. All in favor? Yeah. Okay. I left that out.